Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this third session of the GAP workshop, which is going to be focusing on interview preparation and the two sides of the hiring process. So today we will use the Q&A function of the Zoom meeting. So it's not the chat section. It's the if you go to plus in your Zoom bar, you should be able to find questions and answers. And we want you to send your questions during the presentation here, because in this section you can upvote certain questions if you are also really interested to get the answer to those. And at the end of each section in the presentation, we will look at the most upvoted questions and we will answer them, basically. Both after, I think we can do that after Carrie's presentation about NSERC and after the panelists roundtable at the end. Okay, so can the slide switch? Okay, awesome. So today we have the pleasure of having Carrie Sommer as our invited speaker. I will let Carrie present herself if she wants to begin.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Sommer. I am from NSERC. I'm a program officer in the Scholarships and Postdoctoral Awards Division. I have been with NSERC for 8 years, and I work with the Physics and Astronomy Committee. So the compiling of the review committee for the evaluation of the doctoral and postdoctoral applications that come through. And I thank you very much for inviting me here today. We have a new program to present to you, and I look forward to doing it.
We're extremely happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I can continue with the introduction. So I think everyone would be mostly familiar with the rest of our faces at this point, but just in case, my name is Jess Speedie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Victoria, and in the fall, I'll be transitioning to be a 51 Peg Fellow at MIT. I'm also the vice chair or previous vice chair of the graduate student committee of CASCA, and one of the organizers of this workshop series.
And I'm Emily Deibert. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently a science fellow at the Gemini South Observatory in Chile, but I will be moving soon to start a Banting Fellowship at the University of Waterloo. I'm a member of the CASCA Postdoctoral Committee right now.
Amazing. And for myself, I am Adrien Elias. I use him pronouns, and I am a PhD student at Western University, and also the outgoing chair of the GSE. All right, let's begin. Jess, you want to share the slides on your screen?
Yes, I will go forward with that now. Okay, so as with previous workshops, we always start with a couple disclaimers about exactly where all the information on these slides comes from. So really important to emphasize, a lot of what we're talking about here, we're sharing our personal experiences and those of our colleagues, advice that we receive from supervisors and mentors. And also we've been relying a lot throughout the whole series on this AMPA program, the Astronomy Mentorship Program for upcoming postdocs. Which is linked here, as well as Taylor Hutchison's postdoc job cycle guide, which we've also highlighted a lot throughout the series. So just a brief disclaimer. And then for this specific workshop, where our two topics are interview preparation and the two sides of the hiring process, here's some additional resources that you might also like to check out. There's interview advice from Astro Better, which is super comprehensive and amazing. And the MIT Communication Lab also has a very helpful list of questions that you might want to bring to your faculty interview. So different scope, but there are definitely some questions and pieces of advice in there that are relevant for postdoc interviews as well. And of course, Taylor also has a section on her website for this topic. And yeah, just a reminder that this is the third of a series of 4. And we hope that the rest of the workshops in this series are also very useful. Okay, so this workshop, session 3 of GAAP, here is our plan, our schedule. So the first half-ish, probably a little bit less than half in terms of time of this workshop, will be dedicated to the candidate side, so the interviewees side, the applicant side, the prospective postdoc side. So Emily and I will start with a very brief lecture style presentation about the basics of taking interviews. So we hope to not exceed 20 minutes, even less if possible. And then we'll really hear from one of our special invited speakers, Kari, who will tell us all about NSERC and the next postdoctoral PDF programs for about 15 minutes. And then we will take a very short coffee break, 10 minutes max, so that at 45 minutes past the hour, we can welcome our invited panelists to tell us about the other side of the hiring process, the employer or the hiring committee side. So we'll introduce those panelists and we'll have a roundtable discussion with prompted questions that we prepared, about 8 of them, and then we'll go into our open Q&A. So throughout the roundtable, do send your questions in the specific question section of Zoom so that we can do the upvoting and ask the ones with the highest number of votes. Okay, so let's dive into this little lecture quickly on interview preparation. Emily, would you like to steal the screen share?
Hopefully you can see my screen all right now.
Yeah, good. Perfect.
Okay. So like Jess said, we're going to start out with a brief presentation about kind of the basics of what to expect for interviews, both before you have the interview, preparing for it, and actually during the interview. And I will start off. There we go. Okay. So first we wanted to talk about, what is the purpose of an interview? Why do you actually go through this process? And interviews for postdocs are really important, both from the institution side, but also from your side as an applicant. From the institution side, what the institution might be thinking about during your interview is really deciding if you are a good fit for the institute and for the particular position that you have applied to. They want to see how you think and react to their questions about your research in the moment, and also determine if your future research goals align well with their goals as an institute and their goals for this particular position they might be advertising. But like I said, the interview can be a really important opportunity for you to decide if this is actually the right position for you. Of course, you've applied for the position, you think it might be something of interest to you, but the interview can really give you a bit more information on that you might not have been able to glean just from the job application. So from your side, the interview accomplishes, it gives you a chance to decide if the institute is a good fit for you, kind of gives you a vibe check on what the institute might feel like. It allows you to express important points about yourself. So this may be things that you've already covered in your statement or in your application. You can really highlight these now, focus in on these points, and explain to the committee, why you chose to highlight those in your application. And then often the interview gives you an opportunity to ask questions about the position, about the department, the institute, the culture there, that you might not have gotten from the application itself, but that you might be curious about when it comes to deciding if this is the right position for you. So there's really, everything we've kind of talked about in this workshop series so far, how the interview is actually set up can vary from position to position. But there is kind of a usual format that most of us have experienced in our own interviews, that I've experienced in my interviews. And we've kind of laid that out here. So typically in a lot of interviews, you're not interviewing one-on-one with one person, although you may be. But typically there may be a larger panel who's interviewing you. And the interview usually starts with the panel introducing themselves and who they are, maybe why they're a part of this committee. And then from there, you usually move into a science presentation. We said here it's typically about 10 to 20 minutes, but in my experience, it's varied. Even outside of this, I've had presentations as short as 5 minutes in some of my interviews. But often what I've found and what all of us have found is that it's typically around 10 to 20 minutes. So this is really a chance for you to share your science, go into more detail on what you talked about in your statement. And in the next few slides, we'll talk more about how to prepare for that. After the presentation ends, you typically have follow-up questions from the panel about the presentation itself. So these are typically not prepared questions that they've prepared in advance. It's just kind of questions that come to them as they're listening to your presentation. After that, they often move into more general questions. What I've found is that these can sometimes be pre-prepared by the committee, so they all know what question they're going to ask in advance. But sometimes they might also come up with questions on the spot. And then the interview will typically end with you asking them questions about the position, anything else you might want to know. And we didn't list this here, but often they will end by telling you a little about what to expect next, when you might hear from them, any next steps for the process, and so on. So that is the typical format that I've encountered in most of my interviews, but sometimes it may vary a little. You may not have a formal science presentation with slides, but maybe instead you just speak about your research to the panel without having slides to go along with it. Or in some cases, there may not be a science presentation at all. You may just have questions from the panel. Now, interviews themselves can be conducted in a wide range of ways. They're often remote, but they can also be conducted in person, or we've even sometimes heard of interviews being asynchronous, where you might be sent the questions that you then answer over email or through some kind of AI program. I've found in my experience, at least, remote tends to be the most common now. So you likely are going to be doing the interview over something like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or so on. The interview may or may not be recorded. Often the panel might want to record the interview so that anyone not present can watch it after the fact, or if they need to go refresh their memory on what you said, they can go watch it again. I've also found that it can vary in terms of whether or not they send you the questions in advance. I've had some interviews where I'm sent questions in advance so I can prepare for what to answer. And in some cases, they may send some sort of rubric or some sort of kind of points they're looking for in the interview so that you can prepare for that. But again, this really varies from different institutes. And as well, I found that sometimes the panels may paste the questions in the chat. So this can be helpful as well if it helps you to read the question in addition to hearing it spoken. But again, all of this may vary from panel to panel. So a little bit about how to actually prepare the science presentation, assuming you do have a science presentation for the interview. I think the main thing to keep in mind here is that you're not necessarily speaking to someone who's an expert in your field, especially if it's a wider panel. There may be people who are at the institute but don't work in your exact area. And so it can help to really keep things simple and suitable for a general science audience. And really, especially if you do know who's on the panel, keep in mind who's on the panel and try to tailor the presentation to that. You also really want to be focusing on, the one kind of exciting result that the panel wants to hear about. So in the case of theorists, 90% of your time may be spent on debugging your code or writing new code or models that don't converge. But what they really want to hear in this very brief presentation is about the one model or the one result that did converge, or the main result you got out of that. In my case, I'm an observationalist, so 90% of my time is really spent on data reduction, observing, writing pipelines, things like that. But what you want to present is really that main result that came out of your final reduced data. So focus on kind of the exciting results that they want to hear about in your presentation. What to include really varies on the position itself and anything particular they might have asked for. But generally speaking, you might want to include the following points in your presentation. This can include research highlights. So, the same kind of highlights you talked about in your statement, you want to highlight those in the presentation. An overview of the future research that you want to do, particularly at this position that you're applying to, and then an impact of that current and future research. It can also help to, depending on your research area, mention which missions or observatories or tools, methodologies, or resources at that particular institution that you plan to use or develop. So if they have access to a telescope, for example, that's really relevant for your research, that's a good thing to mention because it shows why you're a good fit for that particular institute. And that leads into the next point, which is why you want this specific role at this specific institution. So just like with the statements, you really are going to want to tailor these presentations to the different jobs you're applying to and make sure you explain why you've applied to this job in particular. And then if the time permits, you can also include things like non-academic work, such as DEI activities or outreach activities. And I've just noted on the bottom here as well that some positions may ask for very specific points to be included. Maybe they do ask you to specifically mention your outreach work, or maybe they want you to very specifically mention what you consider to be your most impactful result in the field, things like that. So if they ask you for something specific, of course, make sure to include that as well. So I'm going to pass it over now to Jess, if you want to take the screen share to talk a little bit about preparing.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, just to mention some details on preparing logistically, this might sound a little bit trite, but when it matters, it really matters. So if you're taking a virtual interview, it's important to plan ahead a very comfortable and quiet place to take the interview. And huge emphasis on making sure you have a strong, stable Wi-Fi connection. It's always a good idea to join the meeting early to just double check that all the software is updated. Zoom's not going to pull an update on you. Your camera, your mic, anything you need is working. Other notifications on other applications are muted. Your desktop windows are cleaned up. And basically, there's nothing going to be in the way of you basically, starting out strong on the right foot. You might also want to have some things around you that can help you in the moment. So maybe a notepad to jot down some notes or questions you think of in real time, or some water, because sometimes these interviews can be quite long, and it's nice to also have that opportunity to take a little breath and relax. And taking a sip of water can sometimes help you do that. So as Emily mentioned, there's a large fraction of the interview that's typically you getting asked questions, and there are basically some questions that you should be able to answer. And you can make this the case by basically preparing answers to typical questions. So things like, what are you bringing to the table? What draws you to this position? Can you briefly describe, one of your science results that's had the greatest impact? But basically, there are typical questions that you're going to want to be able to speak about on cue. It's also a very good idea to ask previous interviewees for the position that you're interviewing what the panel asked them last year, because it may often be the case that a panel reuses a question bank year to year. You don't necessarily want to speak your answers verbatim like a pre-prepared script, but just be able to talk through the main points and have the main key ideas sort of front of mind. So here's a bank of questions that you may be asked, collected from the AMP Up program. So, what are your 5 to 10-year goals? Why is this institution right for you? Tell us about a time you overcame a challenge or an obstacle. What's the impact of your research? These kinds of things. And here's a link to some more lists of questions from the Astro Better article. Okay, so then sometimes you may also be given the opportunity, maybe towards the end, to ask your own set of questions. And this is very important. If you ask good, thoughtful questions, it can say a lot. It can show that you've done your homework, that you really are there and you care and you're interested. And depending on what kind of questions you ask, it can also make the interviewers feel that you already belong. You already kind of know what this community is about. You might also think about asking them questions that sort of allows them to brag about things that they are offering, right? Resources, recent revamps to the program, basically things that they'll enjoy talking about. And along those same lines, if perhaps there's a lull in conversation, you could also have questions prepared to ask about the interviewer's research, because people love talking about good things, and scientists love to talk about their work. So here's also a bank of questions that you may ask. This really will depend on what you don't know and what you want to know. But you may not know and want to know things like, how does this research group function? Or what are your mentoring schemes? Like, is there sort of, certain people responsible for supervision or mentorship of certain other people? Or in the case of your supervisor, how much time, will I actually have on a weekly or monthly basis? These kinds of things. And yeah, this same article has a lot of examples of questions you may ask as well to think about. Okay, almost done here. So some sort of other general tips. Really, like you want to convey your enthusiasm. And you might be nervous, it might be quite nerve-wracking, but just let your enthusiasm shine through. You might also want to think about sort of the sound bites that the panel will take away, and I think we'll get to this later in the session, but it's possible that the people who are making the decisions are not necessarily there in the interview as well. And so, yeah, think about make it easy to know who the panel will go on to basically argue for, who they are arguing for. Also, of course, practice your science presentation with colleagues or on your own. Do mock interviews. You'll be surprised at just how difficult it can be sometimes to, you think you know what you want to say, but then to say it in a way that is sort of right immediately at hand can sometimes be quite difficult. And take your time as well to answer the questions thoughtfully. If needed, ask the panel to repeat their question if it wasn't clear. You could always say that's a good question and really show that that you're thinking carefully and that it's a real conversation, right? But try to relax because everyone on the panel really wants you to succeed. And then to sort of transition to the topic of later in this workshop, if possible, you really want to have a good understanding of who you're talking to. So if it's not already described to you in the invitation email for the interview, absolutely ask who's on the panel, who will be interviewing you, who you'll be talking to. So as Emily mentioned before, it could be astronomers, subfield specialists in your field, or out-of-field scientists, or HR folks who would only probe your soft skills maybe and not so much the science. Or you could be interviewed by the head of the department who is a scientist but perhaps not in your subfield. Or it could be a very small panel, the person who will be hiring you, who will have very specific questions about your work and the project. So I think that is the end of our short little interview preparation basics lecture. So we are 6 minutes over time, but I think let us pass it on now to Kari for your presentation. Are you able to share screen?
I should be able to. We're almost there. I just popped up the chat panel, and that's going to be blocking the way.
Okay.
And there we go. Oh. Am I successful? Everyone is able to see the slide?
Perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for inviting me here today. I use she, her pronouns. I have watched some of the previous recordings in the workshop series. I think it's fantastic that you are doing this. And I recognize some of the names as prior award holders, current award holders, past applicants to the programs. And I really do appreciate being here with you today. I'm assuming as well that we have some other individuals, not just the names that I was able to recognize, that have recently applied or are going to be applying to the programs that are upcoming. In terms of where this information is coming from, we have our postdoctoral award program literature online. There are a number of resources I'm going to be mentioning in the presentation today, and potentially, if you think it's a good idea, I'm going to post links to those items in the chat during the break because you can't click on it in a video, right? So I want to be able to guide you to where everything is found. I come from the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. For those of you that are not familiar with the NSERC acronym, we are one of 3 funding agencies, federal funding agencies. There is also the SSHRC, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and CIHR for Canadian Institute of Health Research. I'm with the Scholarships and Postdoctoral Award Division at NSERC. I am going to be presenting in English, but all of this information is available in French. And si jamais vous voulez exprimer une question en français ou besoin de clarification, don't hesitate to ask it in French if you need to, okay? Whether it's in the chat or verbally. Time is tight, so I'm going to pour through this presentation. It's going to be very high level. Online content is to please be taken as the regulation, the rule, the written guideline, because if something that I've said today you take away is contradictory to what you're reading online, go with what's online, send us an email, ask for the clarification, okay? And There we go. So first of all, a quick background on the new tri-agency programs and why everything has changed from last year, if that's what you were used to. An overview of the postdoc program, the selection criteria, and the indicators that we evaluate. We ask the reviewers to evaluate the applications on, as well as the review process that we take the applications through, some quick advice and tips, and then upcoming NSERC Q&A sessions, because we do have that opportunity at the end of August and beginning of September for doctoral and postdoctoral applicants to come and get 2.5 hours worth of you ask your question, we'll give you an answer. Okay. So budget 2024, there was an announcement from the federal government, and that saw a few things happen. There was an increase in the stipends. So those of you that are familiar with the awards, the amounts have gone up. But also within that, there was a directive for us to harmonize our programs, because a lot of the programs that we had with the SSHRC, CIHR, and NSERC, we all had our own individual postdoc award. We all had our own individual doctoral awards. So we were asked to harmonize these and streamline, make things simpler for the community. 10 programs will be our sunsetting. There's the master's program, the various doctoral programs, and the postdocs, specifically the Banting Postdoctoral Fellowship, the NSERC Postdoc Fellowship, and then the SSHRC and CIHR ones. And 3 harmonized programs have now been developed and launched in March of this year. There's the Harmonized Masters, the Doctoral, and the Canada Postdoctoral Research Award, the CPRA. It is very similar to the NSERC PDF program, if you are familiar with it. It is $70,000 per year for 2 years. The application deadline, the research portals are now open. Application deadline is October the 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern time, not the time frame, not the time zone of the coast that you are living on. And we will announce the awards in February. NSERC online system is how you apply, and you use Form 201. This is all explained within the application instructions, which I encourage you to read as a whole to start off, and then frequently throughout the application, the creation of your application, okay? It is open to Canadian citizen, permanent residents, protected persons, and now foreign citizens, international students. Okay, that is something that is new. And that is because we have sunset the Banting and the Vanya Canada Graduate Scholarships, and so we've incorporated the international component into this one harmonized program. All right, these are some high-level details. Again, the program description page contains everything. Eligibility window for this program, the degree completion date can be no more than 36 months before September 1st of the year of application. That being said, if you're applying this year, you must have completed your PhD degree, if you've completed it, September 1st, 2022 or later. If it's August 2022, you are outside of the eligibility window. Okay. However, there are exceptions to the eligibility window. Please go to the program description to see them. They contain things like parental, relevant work experience, and there's 4 others, I believe. But please go to the program description, okay? And if you want to ask me specifically, I'll find that information and we'll talk about it after in the Q&A session. Applicants must either hold a doctorate or be enrolled in the final year of their doctoral program. So that is so that they are able to take up their award in the following year. Applicants may apply a maximum of 3 times to this funding opportunity. So there is a limit, but given that 36-month window from your degree completion, it pretty much equals out to the same thing. 3-time maximum within 36 months of completion of the PhD. Okay. International applicants, however, must meet one of the following. They must be currently enrolled in or have completed a doctorate health professional degree, that's CIHR, at a Canadian institution, or be conducting postdoc research at a Canadian institution. Up to 20% of all postdoctoral awards will be awarded to international applicants. They may only hold the award in Canada. Location of tenure on a broader sense, it can be held at eligible Canadian host institutions, and up to 30% of all postdoctoral awards are eligible to be taken abroad. Okay, so that would be for the Canadian citizens, permanent residents, protected persons. If you have completed your PhD degree at a Canadian institution, you are eligible to take the award abroad, but only 30% of the applicants, the successful applicants, will be able to take it abroad. Selection criteria, research potential and experience, 50%. Quality of proposed research program, 50%. I will expand upon this in the next slide. Other things to take note of: applications can be submitted in the official language of your choice, French or English. You cannot have already received a postdoctoral level award from CIHR, NSERC, or SSHRC, and you cannot hold a CPRA currently with another tri-agency research training award. I am going to go back 2 slides, because that final bullet on this slide, applicants may apply a maximum of 3 times this funding opportunity. I want to make it clear that anyone that applied to the NSERC PDF program or Banting, that doesn't count. It's this funding opportunity, maximum of 3 times. So if for some reason you're already in that gap and you're that bridging year and you're wondering if the past applications count, they don't. Only starting at this point forward, okay? All right, selection criteria and indicators. I am just going to name off a few. There's actually quite a long list of these indicators under each of the selection criteria, okay? So research potential and experience, some of them include contributions to research and development, professional, academic, extracurricular interactions, and collaborations with supervisors, colleagues, peers, students, and members of the community. This is an example. The coordinators, the brain children, people, whoever came up with this, and those that are participating in it and assisting with it behind the scenes, this goes on your list, okay? And your individual commitment, because it's a collaboration, your individual commitment should be spelled out in terms of your contributions and statement section of your application form. Relevant training, such as academic training, lived experience, traditional teachings, okay? If you'll see at the bottom of the slide, have a little asterisk. All of this is coming from the NSERC Review Committee Guide for the CGRSD doctoral and the CPRA programs. And that document is the guide that we give to our review committee members. It tells them what their role is, what we want them to look for. And there are these appendices, how the scoring system works and so on. That's available to the public, okay? So I am going to be popping that link in to the chat later. But Appendix B is where you're going to see it all laid out for the postdoc program. The second selection criterion is quality of proposed research programs, 50%. Some indicators include the significance, feasibility, clarity, and merit of the research proposal. The justification for location of tenure. You have the ability to list up to 3, 1, 2, or 3, your choice. If you only list 1, that's okay. But a justification for each of the proposed locations of tenure that you've listed. Academic training and relevant work experience. And again, there are a few more indicators under that criterion. The review process, what happens when your application comes into us directly through the online system, we verify it for eligibility. Then we hand them out, assign them to our committee members based upon their expertise and what your application is about. 3 members are going to review your application. They are going to score it individually. They submit their scores to us. We compile them and we create this initial ranked list. And then there is a cohort around the funding cutoff line, but a good portion of applications, because the number of awards we're able to hand out is budget dependent. And it does fluctuate a little bit year by year, but we take a larger amount of applications to the PDF review meeting, to the, CPRA review meeting, where they are all individually read by all of the committee members ahead of time. And then they're discussed one by one at these review committee meetings, so that every application does get a thorough review, discussion, and members ask their questions of each other, clarifications. They actually they really put a lot of time and thought into it. And then they each provide another final individual score, and it's confidential, so they're not feeding off of each other there. It's all confidential. And then I get my final ranked list, and then the announcements of results go out in February. The review committees, who makes up the review committees? We have 14 committees in the division of doctoral and postdoctoral awards. Mine, and the one that is most relevant to you is Committee 178 for Physics and Astronomy. And it currently is comprised of 14 members. All of these membership slates are available to you online. Honestly, Google works great. NSERC selection committees, NSERC evaluation committees. Just remember that we are the scholarships and postdoctoral awards select section. Don't look in discovery grants, because grants has their own committees, their own physics committees. You're looking for the scholarship and postdoc award. And you will see the panel of members that I had recruited. They have a 3-year term, but they do rotate out, and some of them leave before their term is over. But you can take a look and see the names and the institutions they're affiliated with. We do not have the space to be writing out the research expertise, but just go and look each one of them up, and that'll give you a feel of who is there. Members are recruited to cover a broad range of physics and astronomy research areas. And they include researchers from academia, government, and industrial settings, as well as over various degrees of expertise. We have some postdocs on the committee. We have some early career researchers on the committee, and we have established researchers. Okay. If the guidelines on governing membership of selection committees, that is a document that's available online as well. It tells you the everything that I have to try to adhere to in terms of geographical expanse abroad, like members from outside of Canada, linguistic profiles, and so on and so forth. So it really is a really big puzzle that we try to piece together to make sure we've got a broad committee. Okay. Guidelines on the assessment of contributions to research, training, and mentoring. Another big document that we provide an orientation session for our committee members. There are a number of documents that we tell them they must read before they start reviewing applications. There are training modules that they must take, bias and peer review. This document that I've highlighted in the PowerPoint here, that is something that speaks towards different ways to assess contributions to research and training. It's not just the number of publications. There are other factors that we want them to take into consideration. And if you want me to expand on that more later on, I can. But we tell them they go and read it, because every application is going to be different. Every applicant's path is going to be different. Individuals are coming from outside Canada. Individuals are coming from more rural communities rather than urban versus rural. You know, everyone's got a different story to them, and we have to be able to take in all of their contributions and what makes their research potential that evident, okay? Research subject codes entered in your application determines its assigned review committee. I'm assuming the majority of individuals here would be choosing 3200. That's the astronomy and astrophysics research subject code. Advice and tips: read the application instructions thoroughly and often. A lot of the points that I heard Jess and Emily mention, and that I saw in the other videos, they adhere to this as well. Clear, concise communication, avoid the jargon. My third bullet down here, use clear, plain language, general science audience. I do have some experts on my committee, but sometimes due to language conflict or institutional conflict, I can't assign the expert your application because you're at U of T and they're at U of T. That's just a random example, right? I can't give them your application. So therefore, I have to pass it off to someone else. I still try to go with who is going to have some expertise in your area. But at times, I have to pick someone just a little bit outside. So that general science audience is very much is very important when you're writing your research proposal. Give yourself adequate time to complete the application and submit it through the NSERC online system before that deadline, October 17th, 8 p.m. 2 reference letters must be submitted as part of the application, so please invite them early. Give them plenty of time to be able to submit their reference letters. It's all incorporated in the application. It's part of it. They get an invitation once you name them within the application system. And ensure that up-to-date transcripts of your graduate studies are submitted with your application. This is the mistake that happens, unfortunately, from time to time. And then we have to reject the application if we can't confirm it with the information that's held within. And that includes fall 2025 transcripts if you are currently registered. Even if it's like your last year of your PhD degree, even if there are no marks written in it, we need to see that you are still registered. It's just confirming where you are at your process and if the degree has been completed yet. Um, I think I had one more point on that, but it can't be that important because I've forgotten it. NSERC Q&A sessions. As I mentioned, we are going to be hosting them this fall. We do them every year. Towards the end of August, beginning of September, we host these. We ask you to read the literature ahead of time, watch some resource videos if we have them available because we're doing the changeover between the program names. The dates are being finalized. And once they are complete, we will be sending them out to institutional liaisons, our scholarship liaison officers and our postdoctoral administrative liaisons, and they will be posting them on their institution's websites for you to be able to see, but just contact us. Just contact me. I'll let you know what the dates and times are. Early August, we should have that nailed down. And that's it. This is my contact information, and it can be found online. And our general inbox is that NSERC program staff email address there. It comes to the general inbox, monitored every day, not weekends, but every weekday. And then it's triaged to the most relevant person to answer your question. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. And I will let you guys tell me what we have time to do.
Thank you very much, Carrie. So we have one question in the Q&A section that was not answered yet. Michael is asking, will NSERC CPRA awards provide results before February 15, as American postdocs may require answers by then?
Before February the 15th, that particular date. I cannot guarantee. We always like to get the results out as soon as we can, but we say February in order to give us that buffer zone, right? If we try to hit a date and then we miss it for some reason, then it's just everyone's been counting on it. If you would like to have more precise information, I say contact us in January and say, how's it looking? Do you think they're going to be released by the beginning of February? But we don't tie ourselves down to a specific date within the month, just because you never know what happens.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I would just add on quickly about that last point that if you have an offer from an American postdoc that's trying to adhere to that February 15th and you're waiting on NSERC, I think it's fine to say to the American postdoc, hey, I'm waiting for another award. Could you possibly extend a little bit, give me a few more days to hear back from NSERC?
Yeah. Isabel, you have a question?
Hi, yeah, this is just slightly adjacent, but I've still got a couple years until I finish my PhD, and I'm wondering with the NSERC awards if the PhD awards are also available to international students now.
Yes, they are.
That is lovely news. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So perhaps I can chime in here. We are approximately 10 minutes behind in our schedule, and our invited speakers have all arrived. So I think to respect their time, maybe we skip the coffee break and we dive right into the next session, the next section of the session, I mean. How does everyone feel about that? Okay, great. So we've received Kari's slides already, and we will post them on the GAAP website. And also, yeah, please go ahead and send the links to all of the online program details in the chat. And there was another thing that I meant to say, but I've forgotten now. But we should hopefully have time for questions. Kari, if you can stick around at the end as well, so we can people can still percolate and yeah.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'll stay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Adrian, take it away.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let our panelists introduce themselves a little bit. So we have, let me switch the slides. today we have the chance to have three great people coming to talk to us about their experience um, and about their views on these things. So John, Christine, and Lily, when you present yourself, feel free to share your current career stage slash position and where you have been before. And also, importantly, why did you agree to be here today on the panel? I think this is a great question to be answered. So we can start from we can go from left to right, starting with John.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. So as it says there, I'm John Blakesley. I'm sort of this head of the research and science services at Noir Lab. So Noir Lab has been around for about 5 years. I'm based in Tucson. So it brings together Gemini Observatory, the former NOAO, and now Rubin Observatory operations beginning this October when operations formally begin. So I oversee the group of scientists that staff all these observatories. There's about 130 or so altogether, including the telescope operator. So Emily is one of the members of the division. So in my past positions, well, after my PhD, I had a couple postdocs at Caltech and Durham University. Then I spent 5 years as a research scientist at Johns Hopkins working on Hubble projects. After that, I had a faculty position for a few years in Washington State. Then I moved from there to a sort of staff astronomer position at NRC Herzberg in Victoria, so 10 years in Canada, and which was great. After that, then I became chief scientist at Gemini Observatory based in Chile for a few years. Left there during the pandemic, and when Noir Lab formed, I took this new role as kind of science management at Noir Lab. So I've been on a lot of interview panels. So I think that's why I was asked, and that's why I'm here.
Amazing, thank you.
Great,
Christine, if you want to present yourself.
Sure, I can go next. So hi, everyone. My name is Christine Speckens. I'm a faculty member at Queen's University in Kingston in Ontario. To give you a bit of a history, I was an undergraduate at Queen's University. I did my PhD in the US at Cornell. I was a Jansky Fellow a while back. So I was a postdoctoral fellow at Rutgers, and then a faculty member at the Royal Military College, which is also in Kingston. And then I've been cross-appointed at Queen's for a few years now, and finally have moved to Queen's as a full faculty member. So I study galaxies. I'm interested in galaxy structure, and in particular the gas in galaxies. So I have a research group here at Queen's. That tackles sort of various aspects of that sort of problem from an observational perspective, and we sort of work with groups around the world on connecting that with simulations. So why did I agree to be here? Because I think it is always really helpful when you get a chance to chat with people and ask questions. And I think the process of going from a graduate student to a postdoc is particularly tricky, or a graduate student to whatever your next step is going to be. And certainly there aren't a lot of resources out there. And so if this is helpful to anyone who is on the call or who listens to this recording after, then this was more than worth my while. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Christine. That's beautifully put. And then we have Lily Zhao.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lily. I'm a current postdoc at the University of Chicago, so I think I might be representing more of like the more recently on the interviewee side of these interviews. I graduated from Yale University with my PhD in 2021, at which point I moved to the Center for Computational Astrophysics in New York, which is part of the Flatiron Institute, and then just recently started my second postdoc at the University of Chicago. So I kind of have experience interviewing for both like personal postdocs, like department specific ones, but also like
We don't hear you anymore, Lily. Your mic turned off for some reason.
Hmm.
Oh, you're back.
Am I back now? Did you hear me? Okay, sorry
Like
about
like
that.
like we could hear you for a while, and then suddenly it shut down for some reason.
Oh no, and I speak so fast, you probably missed so many words. So
I think you
maybe I'll
were
just
we missed half of it, I think.
Seconds.
sorry,
Oh.
where should I start from?
Rewind like 10 seconds.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I was just saying why I'm so happy to be here. And I think applying to postdocs is one of those things where there's so many like secret questions being asked that once you like hear about it, you know how to incorporate that into your whole like application process and the interviews. And also Jess asked me, and I would do anything for Jess. So really excited for this opportunity to speak with everyone.
I was going to say, so Lily was my mentor through the AMP Up mentorship program for the 2024-2025 postdoc application cycle, and I would not have been able to get through it without her. So this is yeah, very special connection here. Really, really happy to have you, Lily. Thank you so much.
Amazing. So we are going to have a roundtable discussion. Basically, the way it's going to go is that we're going to have approximately 8 minutes in total for each question. We have some prepared questions to show to our panelists, and again, for people in the public, please send your questions in the Q&A section and upvote the ones you want to see answered the most towards the end of the presentation. I will be monitoring the space throughout the discussion. Okay, with that being said, I can ask the first question, which is for all panelists. So you have first-hand experience being on at least one side of the hiring process. So which side do you have more experience being on? I think we kind of had the idea for most of you. But what kinds of hiring committees do you have experience serving for or applying to? If anyone of you wants to start with.
I can go first, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this will be quick. I have more experience being on the hiring side of the hiring process by this point. Kinds of hiring committees. So I've been on postdoc hiring committees. I'll call them fixed term appointments. So things like software developers, project managers, and then I've also been on faculty hiring committees before. Mostly in Ontario and mostly in Canada.
I guess I can go. So I, like Christine, I've experience on both sides, leading up to my current position. I've probably interviewed 15 times or something over the years with different positions. But more recently, I've led a lot of the recruitment committees for first Gemini and then Noir Lab, and also when I was a faculty member, Washington State. So I think I've probably been on at least 80, maybe 100. I was trying to calculate this last night. Actual interviews with different candidates over the past 15 years or something. And of those 100, let's say, interviews, maybe 50% were probably postdocs, fellows, because so going back to, I was on the Plaskett committee a few times, and then here, um, it's one of my roles is hiring the postdocs, but as well as the scientists, astronomers. I've been on a few faculty search committees, and then everything else, including administrators, HR staff, public outreach people, observatory directors. So yeah, I guess I have a fair amount of experience now, and I was on the committee with Emily, so in her current position. Yeah. Thanks. Lily?
Oh, John, that's pretty hard to follow up. Yeah, I'll say that I have experience interviewing for a variety of job types, like I mentioned, and also both in the States and Canada, and also a little bit in Europe. And I've also kind of, to what John was saying, I serve as the project scientist for an instrument I helped build. And so I have some experience interviewing people for like instrument staff scientist positions.
Okay, so we got also a range of geographical locations, it sounds like, which is really, really good. Shall we move on to the next question, I think?
Yeah, so I can take it for the next question. So the question is, how, when, and why do you find yourself serving on a hiring committee, or potentially being interviewed, I guess, if you don't have as much experience being on the hiring committee? And who serves on the full committee for the hiring of this role versus who might be on the interview panel, if those are different? So do we maybe want to start with John again this time?
Okay, so, well, obviously, if you're in a management role, you find yourself on committees and you can stand, but then you usually have to staff those committees, and so people who are show interest in the institution and the overall scientific environment and seem like they would be uh, good candidates to be on the interview panel. Also, people who interview or volunteer to be on the interview panel. So we love that when people interview. And so a lot of times for the fellows that we hire here, I'll ask a current fellow. So I think I've asked Emily to be on some of the committees that hired fellows here. So basically, if you show interest and you volunteer, you can probably get on a committee, and it's a great experience.
Do we want to go to Christine next?
Sure. So how and maybe when are the two I'll tackle next. So I would say most of the committees that I've sat on have been in the context of either research teams or research groups in which I've been involved. Sometimes those are within sort of a given institution, but in my case, often it has been people from different institutions. I'd say the vast majority of interviews I've been involved in have been virtual interviews as opposed to in person, because people were geographically distributed. Why do I find myself on hiring committees? It is oftentimes because it is helpful to have different perspectives on how a candidate answers a question, or how a candidate expresses how their qualifications for a position. So I think in principle, that's the why. The reality is that for unionized positions, the why is often because we have to. So many unionized positions actually mandate that there has to be a hiring panel, and they also have some guidelines or requirements for the composition of that panel. And so it's a little bit of both, I would say. Oh, sorry, I can answer that second question. Who serves on the full committee versus the interview panel? In my experience, is that it has really depended on the position, and in particular on the number of applicants for a position. So for a position where there's a large number of applicants, that usually requires a large number of reviewers. So there may be more people on the full committee, in comparison to the interview panel. There are also sometimes when a broader range of perspectives is helpful at the initial stage. So going from the applicant pool to the long list to the short list. But then once the short list is in place, there's often one person who has the authority to appoint. And so everyone else on the panel is making suggestions to that one person. Having many people on an interview panel is diminishing returns, both from the perspective of the panel, but also, and probably more importantly, from the perspective of the candidate. It's not useful, nor is it pleasant to sit in front of 10 people, for example. And so that also dictates the relationship between the full committee and the interview panel.
Yeah, thank you. Lily, do you want to add anything to this then?
Yeah, I think to that I'll just add for the like what Christine was saying, like the interview panel you get is usually like a subset of the full committee. And so I'd say when you're thinking of preparing your interview, that kind of plays into a few things. Like when you're preparing your introductory slides, you definitely want to make sure that the introduction of your topic is broad enough to be understood by any astronomer, but really emphasize like why the science that you want to do is so exciting and like perfect for the time being. And so both introduce the concept so they can understand it, but also mention why they should be so excited about it, even if they're not in your field. And the other thing is that the people who interview you then go back to the full committee and like more or less represent what you said to them. So the more clear and the more explicit you can be about the things that you say, so they don't have to be like, oh, well, like I think the interviewer was saying this, but I'm not sure, will have a lot less weight than like, well, on their slides, they said they'd do this, this, and this, or work with this in person, or be really excited about such and such at this institute. If they have that to like refer to sound bites, things that they can spike out, I think they'll be able to make a much stronger case for your interview to the full committee.
Yeah, thank you all. Those are all great answers. Does anyone want to add anything before we go to the next one? Okay, I think we could go to the next question.
Okay, so this is the first in a series of a three-part question. We wanna know what happens before an interview or a set of interviews. So we talked earlier in this workshop about what the interviewee does, what the candidate, the applicant might have prepared, ahead of time. But we want to know what kind of preparation has the interviewing panel done, and are they following instructions in some sense? Have they been told to behave a certain way, or where are they coming from? What context is the panel entering the interview with? All the things that go into preparing to take an interview. Maybe I'll nominate Christine.
Sure. So usually before an interview, a panel has a good panel, let's put it that way, has a set of questions that it has agreed it will be asked. Most good panels should ask the same question of everyone, particularly at a postdoc stage. At later stages, that varies a little bit. But usually there's a set of questions. Usually there is some agreement over who is going to ask the question. There is some thought put into getting the right number of questions. There's also some thought put into getting questions that actually help the panel assess the candidate against the criteria for the position. And oftentimes the panel, again, most of my experience is virtual, so people aren't physically in the room. But usually the panel gets together a little bit beforehand so that we're sure that everybody's there and everybody is in the room by the time the candidate is virtually admitted to the room. Have they been instructed to behave a certain way? I would say other than the the standards that are expected of our profession in just about every professional setting. I wouldn't. I've not been on a panel where someone says, okay, you be good cop, you be bad cop, right? I mean, there's no planning like that, right? At least on the panels that I've been on, I think the expectation is that the questions get asked consistently and equitably across the different candidates. And that's the sort of standards for professional behavior are in place throughout the interview. Some interviews do have someone from the HR department of whatever institution is doing the hiring, and oftentimes their role is to either oversee that process and to help organize the committee, or to have someone who is really checking on not so much the qualifications of the candidate, but the conduct of the interview. And so oftentimes that's their role.
Feel free to jump in, like Lily, if you want to. Please, like, just freely chime in. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll just add that I think it's pretty standard now to get like a list of questions. Like you were saying, like they have a standard set of questions that everyone would be asked. And so that's often shared with the candidates before the interview. And so my kind of like pro tip for that would be, I feel like in a lot of interviews, it's like you give a short talk and then you answer these questions, but that talk is always way too short to talk about all of the incredible stuff you've done with your thesis and want to do, right? And so if there's something that a question is going to allude to, you can save that instead of your talk for other things and then address that when that question gets asked. So you can kind of partition your time out a little bit that way to communicate all the stuff that you want to.
So I would just add, well, I agree with everything Christine and Lily said. And the other thing, just to add, so before the interview, of course, the committee will have read your CV and your application. Um, and if you're being interviewed, it's on the strength of your application. So they're predisposed to be favorable towards you. They may have gotten 50 or 100 applications and they're interviewing 4 or 5. So that's good. You should know that they appreciate the science you're doing and are interested. However, you should not expect them to remember it because they've read through 50 or 100, and that was weeks ago, and they've probably forgotten most of it. So I would just say assume that they know basically nothing about you. So don't expect them to remember anything on your CV. So kind of represent yourself and then talk about your cool science and yeah. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, to highlight one of the things you said. Oh, sorry.
And I was just going to say, hopefully everybody's on their best behavior on the panel. Sometimes it can get a little difficult, but just don't get rattled. Sorry, go ahead, Lily.
So I just want to highlight one of the things you said. I think the most important thing that the panel does before the interview is they get really excited about your application. They've invited you for an interview, right? They're willing to talk with you. They're already excited to talk to you about your science. So when you approach the interview, it's not something you like fail or get an A+ on. It's a conversation they have about science they're already interested in.
Maybe just to follow up, would you say that has anyone in your experience been sort of told to act more like robotically to not express the excitement that you actually have?
No, I've never experienced that.
Good to know.
No, I think panels are often reminded to keep in mind that candidates should be equitably treated. So if you're super enthusiastic, if your sort of typical demeanor is to be enthusiastic, making sure that you're not sort of showing enthusiasm for one candidate over another, for example, during the interview process. So the questions are asked, they don't have to be asked identically. And they, in a lot of ways they shouldn't, right? Because people are different, right? But they should be asked equitably, right? So all the candidates should have an equitable opportunity to present their skills and to, market themselves for the position. And so being consistent across interviews is often something that panels are reminded of.
Amazing. Thank you.
Now, what happens during an interview? So this might seem like a very obvious question at this point, right? But if we are talking about really the nitpicky details, such as are there any roles assigned to each panel member? I think we already kind of touched on that question a little bit, but uh, what do you believe the hiring panel is trying to get out of the interview in the present while it's happening?
Yeah, and maybe even just to add on to that, like, what are they actively doing? Are they taking notes? Are they doing are they multitasking in some way? What's really like going on in the real time?
I guess I can give my take. So yeah, as people already said, it's they tend to be at least kind of the larger searches very scripted with questions ahead of time, and an HR person is usually there to make sure it is all equitable. That's not may not be the case in some, if it's a interview for some research collaboration or at a smaller university and you have a grant and you're trying to hire somebody. But now the larger searches are like that. So they are probably taking notes, listening attentively. They may unfortunately be multitasking. That's why you really have to show your enthusiasm to keep their attention so they don't wander. So and then what are they trying to get out of the experience? So first of all, they want to see if you're, hear about your cool science. That's what they want to get out an understanding and an appreciation of the cool science you're doing. And if you not only the specific cool project you're working on, but how it fits into the bigger picture, that's often the thing that they'll want to know and ask about. How does this fit into the bigger picture? And afterwards, if you're kind of weighing one candidate against another, that's something people can always say, oh, they had such a great grasp of the big picture of how their science fits into the larger effort. And they also, I think, as Emily said or Jess said, that they really want to see if you're interested. So if you know nothing about their institute, and they ask you a question about it, like who would you want to work with here, and you don't have an answer, that's definitely a negative. So do the work ahead of time to show that you've learned about the people there and what they're doing. So they really want to see that you're interested and not just applying everywhere, even if you are. But prepare by making sure you understand what they're doing there. And then finally, they want to determine if you're going to be a good colleague, that they would want you there, that there's someone that would fit in and be very collegial in their group. So kind of all those things feed into it. Trying to somehow gauge that based on these scripted questions.
Yeah, to add to that, I think when panels are done right, the panel is getting information that it couldn't get from your application. So a good example might be if a criteria of the job is your a capability to communicate or your ability to work as part of a team. Those are things that are really difficult to assess from the application proper. And so the panel might be looking for things in particular that it can't assess from the applications alone. I think panels do look for fit. I have opinions about that, particularly at the postdoc level. I'm not sure that's a good reason to interview a candidate, to be totally honest. I think the panel is looking for that as well. A good panel should not be looking to duplicate the information that it already has in your application. As has been mentioned, the panel isn't necessarily going to remember all the ins and outs of your application. But oftentimes it's the panel is looking at how you're communicating, how you're responding to questions, and sort of you're trying to assess your capacity often to work as part of a team or to be part of their organization or institution.
Yeah, I think the last part of this question really gets at like what does the hiring panel need to get out of your interview to like help fight for you in the hiring process, right? And the easier you make that job for them, the better a job they will do. And so maybe a good way to approach the interview when you're preparing for it is to think about how you would help them fill in the sentences of like this candidate is doing this really exciting project and it's now is the time exactly to do that project, or like this candidate is the most prepared to do this project because blank blank blank, or like this project needs to happen at our institute and they're very excited about it because of blank blank blank. And so like thinking about how someone would say that in the hiring committee meeting and how you can communicate that in your slides and make it very explicit will make it a really helpful interview for the hiring panel.
Thank you all. Thank you for those very nice answers. Let's get to the last part, of this question, which is the next slide. It's not reaching. No.
Yeah, so continuing on the same theme, what happens after an interview or after all the interviews for a position have been completed? How do the decisions really get made? What is the panel doing at this point? And maybe if anyone also wants to chime in on, as a candidate, what happens after the interview? Like, how are you feeling? What you might want to do as a candidate after you've finished interviews? Maybe we could start with Christine this time.
Sure. So after an interview, so typically, again, my experience has been mostly sort of virtual, in virtual interviews, which means not all candidates are interviewing on the same day, and they're not necessarily interviewing back to back. So sometimes the interview process can be spread over, for example, several days, in a week. And so after an interview, there's usually a little bit of time, once the candidate has left the virtual room, to sort of just go around the room and do a bit of a debrief and sort of think about some initial impressions. Again, if the panel is working properly, right, there's also a little bit of time for panelists to go away and think a little bit. Oftentimes it is helpful to wait until, for example, all of the candidates have interviewed before cross-comparing candidates. So best practice is that you save that cross comparison for as late as possible in the interview process or in the selection process. And so oftentimes the debrief will focus, for example, is the candidate appointable, for example, is a question that sometimes panels will ask themselves in the debrief. And then there's often time reserved after a little bit later, after all of the interviews, to sort of come to what's hopefully a consensus about the rank order of the candidates. And sorry, how do decisions really get made? I need to think about what you mean by really here. And so you could poke me if I'm not hitting this nail on the head. But I think in terms of how do the decisions get made, the panels that I've been on really do try to operate by consensus as much as possible. So to sort of talk around the room, particularly if there are different skill sets for this person and different expertise across the interview panel, and to really sort of collectively come up with a rank ordered list. Sometimes that's really hard. But generally my experience has been that the panel really is trying to come up with the best fit for that particular position and the most qualified candidate out of the process.
Yeah, I think that answers what we were getting at with that second part. John, do you want to chime in here too?
Sure. So typically, in our case, after the interview, we don't have like a debrief of the committee because there's some concern about bias. So normally we wait until all the interviews, usually it's virtual now, take place, and sometimes it even stretches over a couple weeks because of scheduling. And then everyone sort of regrades there. We have a number of different categories, one being science and maybe another one communication or knowledge of the institution or something, and with different weights. And so then everybody regrades sort of blindly, then meets for a final decision meeting where we look at the grades. And often it's really, I mean, occasionally there's somebody way at the top and then it's clear. But usually it's not so clear that, people differ by 0.01 in their final grade. And then just like Christine said, that there's discussion to get to a consensus based on those grades, and people will point out different things. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Lily, do you want to add in too?
All these different like grading and like ordering methods is like really important. And when you're going through the like job application process, which will be terrible for so many different reasons, like it's so important to keep in mind that there are all these people approaching it in different ways, and there's all these different ways of like evaluating what all of these very qualified candidates who would make the best fit for a position, right? Because it's so easy to fall into this trap that somewhere there exists a list of every astronomer that exists, and there's a finite order, right? Like a distinct order of who's better than the others, but really that's not what it is at all. And so the decisions really come down to very small things or different things. And so I feel like if someone gets a job that I didn't get, I'm like, oh, they're a better astronomer than me, which means they're a better person than me. But that is not really how reality works, right? I think maybe also on this slide, I would love to ask a question for people who have been on panels. I feel like I get all the time the question of whether to send like thank you emails to interviewers or reach out to them after the interview. I'm like go back and forth because it's something that is easy to do and is polite, but I also hate like cramming people's inboxes, right? When I'm sure they're interviewing a ton of people. So I don't know, John and Christine, if you have an opinion on whether you appreciate getting an email like that. And if you do, what would be in such an email?
Great question, by the way.
I think it's nice, but it really doesn't affect the process. So yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
I agree with that. I don't think it affects the process. I, as a panelist, probably wouldn't notice, if everyone did or everyone didn't or some mix of the two.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
I think, yeah, this next question, if you want to change the slide, yes. So this question sort of probes at the previous question a little bit deeper. Some of the things you were saying, Lily and John and Christine. Sorry, not this question, guys. Number 6. Yeah. So I mean, we were talking about a set of criteria, grades, differing by 0.1. and then a conversation or a discussion where we come to a consensus. So maybe this sounds like an obvious question, but what are some of the main reasons why a hiring committee will decide to make a certain candidate an offer? And on the flip side, why not? Does it really, yeah, I mean, like Lily was saying, maybe it's, not about you at all, or there's maybe some things going on that it has nothing to do with you. Or maybe it does. So yeah, just to probe that a little bit more, I suppose, if you can talk about it. And yeah, open floor, please like unmute and chime in whenever you're ready.
I think one of the things that I hear about most often is this like magical idea of like goodness of fit or so, things like that.
Oh, hold on. We lost you.
No. How about now?
Now you're back. Okay, good.
Okay, I think maybe my internet's coming in and out. Sorry. But I think a lot of people use that as like, oh, there's nothing you can do. They were looking for a galaxies person, or they're looking for a gravitational waves thing. But I think on the interviewing side, the things that you can do to kind of address that is to just make sure you make it absolutely clear why the science that you want to do is so exciting to a range of people from different astronomy backgrounds, and why now is the time to do that specifically. And also really come up with ways that both you and the Institute benefit from you joining that place. And so both the resources that you can use there, so they could be excited, like, oh, these are things that we can offer this person. These are things that will help. This is something that we can uniquely do to make this science a reality. And also things that you will bring to the Institute, things that you can add on, things that you can collaborate, not just people who do things similar to you, but things that people do somewhat differently that you could like expand the horizons of. And so in that way, you can like more directly give them ammo to argue that you do make a good fit to the position that you're applying to.
I like this, ammo to argue.
Yeah, I think maybe to add to that, so decisions to make an offer to a candidate, sometimes it's related to sort of a particular research direction. And so this sort of goes back to this idea, like, it's not you, right? It's often that each candidate sort of brings a unique set of skills, sort of particularly, for example, in the context of, say, an independent fellowship, right? And so it might be that there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 independent fellowships, and it can't like all be pulsar people, and it can't all be galaxy people, and it can't all be gravitational wave people, right? And so sometimes there is a little bit of a consideration for the particular field, or for sort of a particular direction within a group. So sometimes a faculty member will interview 4 candidates that are all working in pulsars, but they're working in sort of slightly different aspects of pulsars. And sort of that comes into their assessment. But oftentimes committees have a really hard decision to make. They've interviewed 4 fantastic candidates, and they're all fantastic, and they would all be wonderful. It's just there's only money for one position, right? And so someone has to come out on top, right? But oftentimes that decision is difficult, and it often is not because one candidate is markedly better than all the rest. It has to do with sort of other elements, and sometimes it just comes down to sort of a difficult choice. Some of the reasons why not. So I've been on hiring committees, less so for independent. So for an independent fellowship, for example, so if you have 100% of the time to do what you want, right? That job description is pretty clear, right? But there are lots of positions where the job description is a little bit less clear. So for example, it's 75% research, 25% service, 75% service, 25% research. Or it's a particular, for example, a particular position in software development or in instrument support or something like that. And sometimes it emerges during the interview that the candidate really doesn't, that there was a bit of a mismatch between the candidate's understanding of the position and what the position actually is, and that it becomes clear that the candidate is a little less well suited to that position than it might have, than their application materials might have suggested. Sometimes there really is an important technical element to someone's capability to do the job that is less clear from the interview or from the application package. There may be, you may be asked sort of a question that's a little bit on the technical side, again, for a role that's a little more specific to a particular project. Sometimes it emerges that in the interview that those answers to the more technical questions were a little stronger among some candidates, or fit a little bit better with the very specific roles that the candidate was going to follow. Every once in a while, it is not always clear that the candidate is actually particularly interested in the position, and that emerges from the interview as well. And that happens for a variety of reasons. I've never been on a panel that has taken that personally, right? Because candidates interview for lots of positions. And so sometimes it emerges that, that the interest of the candidate and their fit to the position in terms of their expectations for the role, but also their capacity for the role is a little bit different coming out of the interview than going into it. So those might be some of the reasons why a candidate isn't deemed either appointable or doesn't wind up on top after the interview process.
Maybe just to follow up on that, Christine, would you say, like, say there's 3 candidates and, all else being equal, you can maybe you would predict that one of them, if offered, would not accept? Does that come into play, the idea that whoever you offer it to, you want them to accept?
I have seen that more at the faculty level, to be totally honest, than at the postdoc level. I think at the faculty level I think that is a consideration, particularly because those negotiations take a long time and they often are protracted negotiations. But I would say I have seen that less at the postdoc level, unless a candidate goes in, and this has happened before, where a candidate goes in and says, I have an offer for a Hubble fellowship, or I'm on that, right, where it's really, really clear that you're the backup, right? And that's helpful information, right? But unless it's very, very clear, I would say the panel does not try to guess the candidate's intentions. And they also don't try to guess once you start delving into intangibles, that's territory where it is very difficult to treat candidates equitably. And I would say good panels try to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree 100% with everything that Lily and Christine have said. That, first of all, just showing them convincing them that you're doing great science and why they should be interested. Is the fit, and if there is a service component, like a lot of them have, then, for instance, we have Gemini fellows, and so you should know something where some fraction of the time is service related to the observatory. So you should know something about the instruments and what you would like to support. Or we also have Rubin Observatory hires some fellows, and there's a outreach component of that and public engagement. So, if somebody has those skills and demonstrate that they have that background and interest, that helps a lot. So yeah, so those are the most important things. And then maybe kind of a lower order is that's you have to, in a sense, it's unfortunate maybe, but you have to come off as likable. I have had cases where it's really important to be enthusiastic and confident, and that you're confident in your work. But I have been experience where some panelists have said, well, he seemed really arrogant. And is that really the kind of person we want? And whether or not that should be playing into it, I think it affects people's judgment, whether or not they mention it. So again, showing that you're a good colleague, and genuine. So just be yourself, a more confident version of yourself, I'd say, is really important.
Thank you, everyone. Christine, please.
So I was going to say, if I can add to that, another thing that sometimes candidates are that the hiring committee is looking for in distinguishing candidates is an answer that is, I don't want to say not obvious, right? But why would you like to, why do you want to come here and use this telescope, right? And the answer, well, because it's the best telescope in the world. I mean, it may be true, right? But there's not a lot of substance to that answer, right? And so sometimes committees are sort of doing a kind of substitution test, right? If your answer is the same answer as you could get by Googling or by, that any other candidate could also give, it's not going to be a standout answer, right? And so looking that the candidate has sort of thought through the answers in a meaningful way and sort of really thought through sort of how they're going to tackle a problem, or they're coming at it from a slightly different perspective. That sometimes there are obvious answers to a lot of the questions, and you know, all of you can Google interview questions for postdocs. I'm sure ChatGPT can give you a great list, right? And so the questions aren't, they're not going to be a surprise to you, right? They're predictable. I think it's sort of the depth and the thought that goes behind the answers that often resonates with committees, because these questions often do have, you know, very straightforward answers, and then they have some answers that demonstrate depth as well. And the committee is sometimes looking for that, and that may distinguish candidates that get offers from candidates who don't get offers.
Like thinking outside of the box is just more memorable.
Yeah, are thinking a little bit more deeply about something. So, you know, why do you want to come here and use this telescope? Well, you know, my research program relies on this thing, and up until now, I've not really been able to do it. But this particular facility is excellent at doing this, and it's not so great at doing this. But I've actually got a colleague who's sitting over here and who's thinking about this in a different way, right? So, sort of demonstrating that you're sort of really thinking about how you would approach, you know, a problem or a topic or the tenure in a sort of a meaningful way. It doesn't have to be planned, you know, down to the very last detail, obviously, but just sort of demonstrating that you're kind of thinking, actively thinking about what it would mean to be appointed at that institution or to have those resources is something that hiring panels notice.
Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts before we maybe move on to our penultimate question? Okay.
So once the candidate, have an offer, how do I negotiate? I think this is an important question to ask, and perhaps John can give some suggestions.
Yeah, so let's see, you know, I think at different levels, there are different ability to negotiate. So I think a faculty position, there's a lot of room to negotiate. For postdocs, there's often a fixed salary, and there may not be much negotiation. So like a Hubble fellow or an NSERC fellow, I don't think you can negotiate salary. But you know, usually at other places, there is some leeway, and if or there may be. So, and you can find that out, like if you were hoping for better compensation. But you can't just randomly ask. You need a reason. So you can say, like, I really want to accept, but you know, it would be difficult because of this. And if I could have, you know, this amount, that would really enable me to take this position, and have, if you have some comparison. So I've seen really detailed um, not arguments, but justifications for what they're asking. So then you can give that back to HR, because HR kind of ultimately decides, or they may disagree with that, but they have they want to ensure equity, and so you know this other neighboring institution, they have this offer. Of course, if you have another offer, then there's a lot more flexibility often suddenly. So you know, you can negotiate, do it very politely and courteously, and you know, with a justification for why you think that what you're asking would be reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything that John has said. There are different constraints on different positions. So in particular, sort of research positions, for example, that are with individual faculty members, sometimes the faculty member has to spend the money before a certain time. Sometimes the faculty member has a lot of flexibility on funding. Sometimes the faculty member has no flexibility on funding, but flexibility on other things like time or sort of things that don't involve cost. I think for those kinds of positions, I always recommend that people negotiate, you know, honestly but selfishly. You know, being really clear about what it is you need, and what what asking for what it is you think would be would be appropriate is a always a good way forward. Generally, once you have an offer, people want you to come, right? They really want to attract you to the institution. Once you have that offer, you're a little more in the driver's seat than maybe you were at the interview stage. The panels that I have been on have, do their best to accommodate what their preferred candidate would like within sort of the parameters of, the kinds of things that they can, the kinds of things about the offer that they can change. Certainly there are a lot of positions that are unionized, and so things like salary, there's really not a lot of room. The room to maneuver is pretty limited, but they will tell you that. So it never, my experience is that it never hurts to ask, especially when it's asking sort of within reason and for something that is reasonably well justified. And usually as someone that you want to work for in the first place will be honest about what they can and can't do, and will give you what I would say, to me, big red flags, people that need you to accept fast. Unless they really justify that, to me, that's a huge red flag. I think, people should be able to give you enough time to make an informed decision, particularly if you have a good reason for needing a little bit more time. They should be able to provide clarity, or at least somewhere for you to look. For example, if you need a visa or you need to relocate from far, those kinds of things. So, to me, red flags, anyone who's trying to move really, really fast, or who's pressuring you into giving an offer very, very quickly. Again, sometimes it arises, right? There's just, there's a constraint related to, say, the pot of money or the circumstances. But usually people try to give candidates that have offers as much time as they need to make the decision that's right for them. Generally at the postdoc level, no one wants somebody to come and accept a position and be miserable, right? Like that's not fun for anyone, right? And so, making sure that you have your questions answered, and that people actually, as they're looking into it, become excited about coming. A good employer is going to want you to be sure about that before you accept an offer. Again, within reason and within the constraints of the program or the pot of money that's being used to fund the position.
Yeah, I think kind of in the same vein. Like one of the hardest things I find about negotiating is like figuring out what is acceptable, or like that I can ask for or like negotiate with. So if it's something that like it's like a departmental fellowship or an independent fellow that happens every year, you could be asked to put in contact with people who currently hold the position and ask them like what sort of wiggle room there was with that. And for other things that have like a less standardized offer, things that I would maybe ask about is like, are there any funds to get you a new laptop, or some sort of like computing resources, right? Like how much travel funding will you have? How many conferences will be like allowed to go to per year, things like that. Something else that I see a lot of people doing is if you have more than one offer, seeing if there's any wiggle room to like combine those offers at one institute so you can spend longer than 3 years somewhere, which really makes a world of difference, especially in a first postdoc, for example. So those are sort of the things, like ask people who've had the position what sort of variance there is there, and then ask about sort of like auxiliary research funds that you'll have in addition to salary, which, as John mentioned, there's usually not a lot of wiggle room on.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, if you're sort of in the position of negotiating an offer and you're not sure what to do, or something seems fishy to you, reaching out to someone you trust, right? Maybe it's someone who wrote you some letters, maybe it's a mentor at your institute, but just sort of running through and finding someone that you can sort of lay the situation out to and say, this feels off to me, and here's why. Sometimes it's just really helpful to talk through, with someone who's had the experience of sort of being on the other side, just to sort of get that opinion. But if you get the feeling during the negotiation process that something isn't right, then it's always good to reach out to someone you trust and, have a conversation and just sort of get that check on, whether you're reading things, whether your interpretation is consistent with what someone else might interpret. But yeah, you should never feel as though you're sort of being forced into something, or that you can't negotiate, right? You should be able to ask for things and have someone say no and have it be okay, right? And if you get the feeling that that's not what's happening, then there might not be a good fit there. And so it's a good thing to consider.
Yeah, I just echo that reaching out to somebody you trust, a mentor, and, does this make sense? That's really helpful and important.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have time for the bonus question? I think we do.
I think we have question 8 and then the bonus question, right?
Oh, right. I forgot about this. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I don't see it with because of the camera. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, we have this one too.
Yeah, so the last of our main questions that we have is what single most important thing should candidates know about the other side of the hiring process? So really, I think this is your opportunity to maybe bring up anything that you wanted to mention that we haven't covered yet. So anyone who wants to start, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, or we could rephrase even like what's something you wish you knew, or yeah, free form, just yeah, what have we not probed that we should have probed?
Well, I can maybe start, Lily and John, you can chime in too. I'll say I've never been on a hiring panel with a hidden agenda. I've never been on a hiring panel where it was all just kind of a circus. They knew who they were going to hire, and then anyways, and we just went through this process for the sake of going through the process to, for the sake of appearances. I've never been on a panel like that. My perception has been that panels really are trying to often make a difficult decision between fantastic candidates, and they're trying to get the information in the interview that will help them make that decision. I think that's, it's important to know it's not all just a sham, right? And I know it feels that way sometimes. At least it felt that way to me, long ago when I was doing these things. And then I think the other thing I wish I knew in my, former self at, the stage that a lot of you are at, and it's been touched on already, is that, not coming out on top, doesn't mean that you're, inferior or that you were, it often is a difficult choice between lots of fantastic candidates. And there have been lots of times when I've been on a panel and we've come away and said, man, I wish we could hire 3 of these people. They're awesome, right? And so it really isn't a statement about, your abilities as an astronomer, or the excitement of your research field, your my goodness, not your qualities as a human, right? It's just oftentimes there's lots of fantastic applicants and there's only one position, and one way or another a decision has to be made. And so it's not taking those decisions too personally, because often they're really difficult, and it's not a statement that the panel doesn't appreciate what you're doing or isn't excited by you or your research. It's just it has to make a difficult decision sometimes.
Yeah, thank you. John, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything Christine said again. That it really does matter. There's but in addition, the panel, almost in all cases, everybody on the panel wants you to do well and to succeed, and to, so if you get a little flustered during the interview, just take a moment and then calm yourself down and continue, because they really do want you to succeed and do well. Nobody likes to see somebody, have that sort of stress. So, they are on your side in a sense. They want you to do well. And I guess, and it matters a lot, though, the quality of your answers and the enthusiasm that you express, because I have seen it complete. We usually interview, say, 5 people, and there's a ranking ahead of time based on the preliminary scores. And somebody seems like they're way on top. And then you'll interview all 5 of them, and that person really didn't convey their enthusiasm, or were not able to really explain the importance of their research, or how why it's important. And so then, and somebody else that may have just barely gotten into the interview stage just amazes you with their presentation and the quality of their answers, and it changes, upside down. So this is not to make you too stressed about it, but just prepare well, and then just be confident, because it really matters a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Lily, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to keep in mind with the interview is exactly what John was saying. Like, everyone there is fighting for you already. They're already excited about your interview. So just help them make that fight for you is your one job, right? They're not there to grill you. They're not there to like catch you out. They're not going to have your application up and be like, but you said this when you submitted this in October, back it, things like that. And so it's really a very friendly, like a very exciting, very like nice environment. And the other thing I'll mention is that for almost all of the interviews I've gotten, I've gone back to my application, read through it just to like see what I said. And in all cases, I found some like grievous error, like cover letters with the wrong institute on it, like people that wanted me to do it double blind, and I put my name in the header of every single piece of paper that I submitted and things like that. And so those sort of things really feel do or die, but often they're not. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so we have just another check-in. We have 10 more questions, sorry, 10 more minutes in the session. Should we maybe open the floor to some like Q&A from other attendees and participants and sort of save the bonus question maybe in case, I don't know, folks don't have questions. I can't imagine that they wouldn't, but maybe we can, yeah, maybe take a second to say, yeah, if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box, which Emily has just typed a question into, so you should be able to see that pop up and find out where the box is, because we're not talking about the chat, we're talking about a little Q&A box. And then we can, yeah, have that voting option of choosing the most upvoted questions. Okay, so maybe, yeah, maybe while folks are typing their questions and then hopefully voting as well, maybe we go to the bonus question. How's that sound? Okay, cool. So this bonus question, the question is, can you share a story about the most memorable interview that you were in, whichever side that might have been? Maybe you were the interviewer, interviewee, and what makes it stand out? Is there some kind of reflection or lesson that you only learned by experiencing it firsthand, or yeah, just some moral that you think a story only can convey in your, in some cases, numerous experiences in interviews.
I think Lily should go first on this one.
Yeah, I was thinking about what interviews like really stand out in my mind. And I think the one that comes to mind is this interview I was in earlier this year that I think I did like a really, truly terrible job on. And the reason, and it's memorable because it haunts me because it was like an hour-long interview. It was very fast-paced questions. And I think for a lot of those questions, I felt like I was like in a timed test. And so I just like launch into an answer and the interview panel would be like, no, 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 that's not actually what we meant. Can you like answer this question instead? And so there I am trying to like stumble to answer a question that I only half understood, feeling like I was giving a really bad answer. It was completely missing the mark and all that stuff. And so I think keeping in mind that an interview is not a test that you're taking, it's a conversation that you're trying to have about your science. And so if you get a question that isn't scripted or isn't obviously clear what they're asking for, saying, is this what you mean before you answer the question, or having that thing, allowing yourself to make those mistakes and readjust is a really important part of the interview. And it's something that I think does take a bit of practice. You get a bit of practice with that when you give talks and people ask you questions, or if you go and like visit a institution to give like a lunch talk or something like that, and you meet with people one-on-one. Those are the sort of experiences that help you kind of like get their legs under you for also like the interview setting of having a conversation about your science.
Yeah, I'm imagining you can kind of t feel yourself like slipping off the plane of understanding and just wanting to always like get back grounded of like, okay, we're having a conversation and we're on the same page, and yeah, to be aware of when you find your feet lifting off that plane, I suppose, yeah.
So I mean, maybe I can go next. I'm staring at this question. So I'll preface this by saying I don't have a, story that would be good enough to tell in, good company over a beverage of your choice, and some, after work sometime, right?
Itself is interesting.
something that's interesting. I mean, I would say that there are interview panels where and John sort of alluded to this already, where, going in, it really wasn't clear. You have one idea, for example, going in, about sort of where the candidates stand. And then you sort of come out with a much different perspective. Or you come out, being particularly excited about a candidate. And those are always memorable. Oftentimes it's, in an interview, it can become clear, sort of, when a candidate distinguishes themselves, or when it is not, when it becomes clear that it's not the right fit, right? And so, as someone on the panel, you're sort of trying to assess, whether, the candidate is qualified for the job. And every once in a while you get an aha moment and it's like, yeah, that was the right answer, right? And right in the sense that it was, it really demonstrated, that the candidate's capability for the job. And so, coming away, really excited about an interview. Some of the more memorable panels that I've sat on, you come away going, wow, I can't believe we might actually be able to get this person to come to our institution. And those are, the panels that are fun and frankly worthwhile, right? Setting up interview panels, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of people who are spending a lot of time, right, trying to make it through the selection process. And when the interview feels really worthwhile because it allowed a candidate to showcase their capabilities in a way that was hard to assess from the application, that's always really satisfying as a panel member, and it reinforces why it can be really important to carry out interviews.
Yeah, so I don't want to tell any stories about interviewing people because mostly they blend together anyway. And I don't want to say any story that anybody would recognize if they see this later. But I've been on, I've been interviewed myself enough times, and I guess the most memorable one was the one for the staff position at NRC Herzberg in Victoria. So I had some medical issues and was actually in the hospital. Spent the night beforehand in the hospital. It was released that morning. Got on a plane, flew to Victoria, and then had the next day what turned out to be like a 3-hour scripted interview. There were probably 10 people on the committee plus an HR person, and I had never experienced that before. Everything else had sort of been free form up until that time. This is 15 years ago. And so they all had their questions. We had to get through all their questions. They were both science, and the service part was supporting actually Gemini, and that's how because Canada, Herzberg provides the Canadians PI support. I never used Gemini before actually, but I had read up on it ahead of time. And so I knew the details of the observer, and so they were asking me lots of questions about Gemini. I was just remembering, what's the F ratio and things like that. That fortunately I had read that, and it just went on forever. It was supposed to be 2 hours. It went for 3, and I was just feeling awful. And normally I'm just totally nervous, and most of my interviews have been disasters. Even though I maybe felt the worst in my life in that interview, it maybe have been the best interview I ever gave because I wasn't concentrating on how nervous I was. I got to get through this. And so yeah, that's so just don't stress, I think is the lesson from that. So
There's a lot to absorb in that story. I'm wondering if there's anything you could have done. Yeah, what do you do when the night before, or
you should probably reschedule. You shouldn't be as silly as I was. But I felt like, this is my life. I need to do this. So I mean, many times people have rescheduled on interviews than when I've been on the panel, and it's never an issue.
that's good to know. I feel like some folks might be hesitant to because, there's a lot of people involved and, you don't want to be that one person who
Yeah.
makes the process more difficult than it needs to be.
You're right. So if it's not necessary, don't. But if it really is necessary, you should.
Yeah, I think maybe to add to that, and it's not a story, but I think something to keep in mind is the interview panel is absolutely shopping, right? But you're shopping too, right? And so if you come out of an interview and go like, "Wow, that was dysfunctional," right? Then maybe stepping back and asking yourself whether that's somewhere you want to go and whether that's somewhere you would like to work, right? You are a valuable commodity. You're a fabulous person. You're doing great research, right? If you come out of an interview feeling undervalued or feeling as though the institution might be a little dysfunctional or feeling as though that wasn't a great experience, right? Then thinking about what that's telling you about the institution and whether that's somewhere you want to go is probably a good thing to do, because they should be, it goes both ways. And just remember your value as a researcher and as someone who's going to make a great impact somewhere, and don't undervalue yourself that way.
Hmm. So in this last minute here, I think, Adrian, we should take some proper time to thank our invited panelists and invited speaker. Do you want to maybe, yeah, hit the next button?
Yes, absolutely, Jess. So thank you very much to all of you, to Carrie, Christine, John, and Lily, for being here today. It was really interesting. Like about a lot of thoughts about interviews and hiring committees. Like we might think things go like this or like that, and it's actually good to like talk about it and even going through the obvious questions. I think it's good because then it might lead to some realizations that these are not these interviews may not be as diabolical as we thought they were, especially with respect to our own self-confidence and vision of ourselves. So yeah, I felt really engaged in the conversations we had today. So that was really cool, I think. On this slide, you can find all the personal websites of the people who contributed to be here today, first of all, but also making the slides. And so thanks again to Isabel, Solveig, and Veronica for this. And we also have Taylor's website once again, as always. You want to add something, Jess?
Yes, definitely. Just that this is like a really rare and special opportunity to be able to have these conversations, right? Like have a platform where this is the focus of our time and energy and really to have, yeah, just the opportunity for sharing, because I feel yeah, it's so beneficial, especially, I mean, definitely for those folks who are, on the job market for the first time, but I think also just going forward. So I just want to say a special, special thank you for your time, Lily, Christine, John, Kari. It's really amazing. Thank you. Kari, did you have your hand up?
I do. I'm sorry. It took me a while to find where to raise my hand, and I apologize for that. But I just want to say that it was fantastic. It was super interesting. And on the last note that was said here in terms of the interview, same thing goes for the postdoctoral awards for NSERC. So many fantastic applicants out there, and we hear it so often from the committee members that they wish they could score everyone higher, but we have a forced distribution model when we have them submitting their scores, and the results of the postdoctoral program for that year do not take that as a true indication of your merit. It's just this is the pool of a national, now international competition. And it's like 20% success rate for the NSERC postdoctoral award. And so do not take it to heart. You are awesome and you got yourself where you are, right? So I just wanted to say that goes for the award process as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you.
Before we end, just one more slide, Adrian. An advertisement for basically contributing to GAAP session 4 for all the attendees and participants, registrants here. Yeah, your questions are solicited. If you have this is the last chance. I mean, the box has been open this whole series, but the next workshop's the last workshop, so this is last chance to submit your questions. And we will basically, use them to inform the roundtable discussion with our next set of invited panelists in GAP session 4 in 2 weeks' time.
Amazing. Okay, I'm now going to stop the recording and end there.